Welcome to the Stars Align Dramas and Dreams podcast, where the infinite sky meets the starry world of dramas. We're your guides through the cosmos, from the heart-stopping queer love stories to straight dramas of unexpected love.
And every unforgettable moment in between that make us swoon, laugh, and cry. And of course, we'll sprinkle in a little stardust along the way.
I'm Nixie, your drama enthusiast, ready to break down the best and sometimes most chaotic storylines, filming techniques, and the worlds we can't stop obsessing over.
And I'm Cyrus, here to delve into characters, themes, and symbolisms that invoke emotions that resonate with us in powerful and lasting ways.
Each week, we'll explore the stellar journey of love, identity, and connection, one drama and one dream at a time. Today, we orbit the series satellite, where we discuss everything a series has to offer. Our satellite this week is orbiting Moonlight Mystique.
So gather your stardust, find your spot under the stars, and let's dive in.
Let's begin by taking a look into the stars, where we take a closer look at the synopses that captivate us and the stars on and off screen who make every moment shine. Join us this week as we stargaze into the captivating world of Moonlight Mystique.
But before we can stargaze deeper, we must start by discussing the basics. Moonlight Mystique is a 2025 Xianxia produced by iQIYI. The show can be watched on iQIYI. It has 40 episodes with a duration of 45 minutes each, which makes the series approximately 30 hours long.
The synopsis reads, Bai Xiao, the youngest daughter of the general mansion, made a vow to cultivate immortality as a way to repay a favor. While on her journey to seek immortality, she unexpectedly saves the powerful demon god Fan Yu. Initially strangers, they gradually went from mutual manipulation to mutual affection, and eventually both fell in love. Despite facing many obstacles, their love was strong enough to overcome any limitations, allowing them to embrace each other truly. Adapted from the novel Bai Xiao Shangxian by Xing Ling. I just want to say that this is very heavy on the romance side, which is kind of shocking considering I feel like while the romance did play a pretty significant part in the storyline, there was so much more going on. There's so much action, there's so much like depth to like the process of their love that was actually their love. Like I don't even know where to begin to start. Like the stone situation, like that could have been majorly put into play. Like to be honest, it's been a while since I've read it, but to be honest, the original description to the actual novel that it was based off of, because I think I briefly read it, was actually based on specifically Bai Xiao, not Fan Yu. It was based on Bai Xiao wanting to become a demon. In fact, I think the description was like one of like a dialogue description. It was or like a synopsis where it was like a conversation with her and her dad, which was interesting because it did get brought up in the series as well, where it was like kind of like, dad, I want to go cultivate and I want to be immortal, like, I want to be a heavenly, this kind of, I want to be immortal kind of situation. And apparently, supposedly at the end of the description, she comes back to Earth, sees her dad again, and her dad asks, did you become an immortal? And she's like, no, I chose the wrong path, like I chose wrong. And that actually happened in the series. She said around the same thing. I can't remember what she exactly said, but it was like, no, I didn't achieve that. I achieved something else, which is essentially because, like, apparently in the description, along with her, the dialogue was like other pieces as well, like script wise, which was like the path to cultivation is like a long, hard one. And if you make one wrong move, you'll go down the wrong path. So that's why later, when she came back to her dad, she's like, I know I chose the wrong one. And so, like, I ended up with a different path of what I originally wanted. And so, honestly, I kind of like how the novel played out because it was more in the favor of her seeking immortality than that of the romance between her and Fan Yu, which was significantly important. But I think they chose heavily to write the synopsis for the drama to capture people's attention more through the love of the two main leads rather than focusing on Bai Xiao's intention of immortality, which is what the novel focused more on, which was kind of interesting.
But in hindsight, with everything that goes on in this drama, how do you condense that?
That's fair. How
So
do you
much
convince?
happens.
But like I said, if they had focused on her goal of immortality and like maybe hinted at some things that happened along the way, like meeting Fan Yu, or like things with like her situation, like, then I think it would have been would have been more accurate.
That is completely fair. But I will say, describing their relationship as going from mutual manipulation to mutual affection is perfect. Like, it's
Oh,
so funny.
that is the most accurate description I've ever heard of this type of relationship, and that's so funny to me.
It's so funny because, like, they're not enemies because, like, like, they truly never fully hate each other. They hate the idea of each other, but it's more so of, "I can't stand you, but, like, you're useful to me,
To be
so
honest,
I'll deal with you."
I think she played him more than he played her.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
and I love that. We love a girl boss because oh
Yeah.
my god.
Like, I'm a big proponent of, the idea of, I support women's rights, but I also, and more importantly, support women's wrongs. Like, yes, girl, manipulate that man. Use him to your advantage.
Oh, she did. She did use them for to her advantage so much. I don't think she fell first. I think he fell
No.
first, and I think it was absolutely through the manipulation of
Oh,
what she did.
he's like, "Oh, you've got me down bad."
Maybe I need to look into the Chinese name for the series, but the English translation name for the series is Moonlight Mystique. And that doesn't always mean that the Moonlight Mystique is the same name that it is in the Chinese title. But if it did not keep the same name as the Chinese title, then at that point it's kind of interesting. It's like I can't say where did you pull it from because it's kind of actually clear in this case where it was pulled from because it seemed very heavily pulled for Fan Yu and his moon abilities. So like it kind of really fits very well in the end.
The stars that guide Moonlight Mystique shine brightly. Let's meet the cast and crew who make it shine. We start with the iconic Bailu as Bai Xiao and Xing Yu. And then we have Aru Peng as Fan Yu and Jing Yuan. We then have Dai Lua as Fu Ling and Chen Huasen as Chang Zhao and Mo Li. This show was directed by Xu Yu Bin and Go Zhu Wei. Xu Yu Bin also directed titles like The Starry Love, Skate into Love, and Ashes of Love. Go Zhuwei was also director for The Starry Love, Skate into Love, as well as Guardian, and many more. Xianxia was the costume director. She's also been the costume director in projects like Love Game and Eastern Fantasy and Love Between Fairy and Devil.
And while there are a lot more talented people who worked on this show, we unfortunately do not have the time to talk about everyone, but we would like to further highlight some of our thoughts about the cast and crew. So this is a little bit of a funny note that is kind of an outtake kind of thing mention. So in our notes when reading this out, I had put in the discussion note section was like, it makes so much sense that Yi Xiaoya was the costume designer for all of those. Also, I've seen slash started every scene drama mentioned by the directors, parentheses, unless you purposely picked those dramas. Newsflash.
That was the entire purpose. When I if you think it's a random selection of ones that I choose to put in there versus others, I literally like go through their My Drama List profile and pick out and like, oh, Nixie's seen this one. Nixie ranted to me about this one. She started this one. And like I cherry pick from those and decide what to put in these scripts. So that's just a fun little tidbit.
But for real though, her costume designs are stunning because a lot of what she did for Love Between Fairy and Devil is actually something I brought up for the general episode that we did for the same week of the release of this episode because that series, the series Love Between Fairy and Devil, left such an impact on me in terms of costume and set designs that I have so much to say about Xianxia because of it, the different things that they do in those type of dramas. So it's amazing to see her work again in a series because I think she does a really good job for what is designed for these costumes and especially having running off of like these fantasy concepts.
I'll say we like C-dramas out inside and outside the wuxia, xianxia fantasy subsection of genres. Not my wheelhouse. So I don't have much to say here.
How dare you? This is exactly why I'm forcing you to watch some of these dramas because you're missing out if you don't watch them.
Out of every single one that I I have listed in like the crew part, the only one I've seen is Guardian.
That's not even a traditional Xianxia. That's not really even a Xianxia. So it's kind of
That
funny
was fully
to me.
sci-fi.
No, and out of
Nixie
those
has an
lists, I have
agenda.
seen a lot of them. I think I've mentioned pretty much all the ones on the list.
Yeah. And since she's been on her journey, she's had an agenda to get me to watch more within these
I've
genres.
achieved some of that.
I think this whole podcast is just her long con to get me to actually have to watch them.
And it is working. I have
I mean,
guys. I've gotten them to watch Moonlight Mystique, which is clearly what this is over. I've gotten them to watch Newsflash, Fangs of Fortune, which obsessed.
keep an eye out for that.
I've gotten them started on Till the End of the Moon, that they now have to restart because it's been a good while.
It's been too long.
That's it right now. My agenda is definitely to get you into some more.
I haven't quite told you, but I've started an active what to watch next list, and there are 3 current Xianxias on there.
Which ones?
So I haven't told you about it yet.
Which ones? Which ones? I need to know which ones.
Do you want to in the list of what my current plan of watching, or just in general?
All of it.
Okay. I actually really want to start pretty soon Love Game in Eastern Fantasy.
Oh, that's so
Um,
good.
The other 2 are Back from the Brink and The Starry Love.
Yes. All of them. Those are all so good.
You need to calm down.
Those are all so good. Good choices. I know there are other people that would argue about some of them, but though I would say yes.
They're literally the
I'm
ones
sorry,
that
you
you
made me
talk
so
about the
happy.
most.
Because
Like,
they're so good.
I hear about these non-stop.
And you have yet to see them, so why not?
No, I really should add Till the End of the Moon back on there, because I really
Yes.
need to finish that one too.
That one's beautiful.
I'll add it to the wheel.
The wheel. Are these ones you plan to watch? Have you started to lean into the longer series now that you've, one, realized you watch things way faster than you realize and have more time to? 2, because are you at least gaining some interest in them?
I don't want to add to your add fuel to your fire. I plead the 5th.
Well, I'm taking that away from you.
That is one of my rights as a human being.
I'm just kidding. Anyways, I need to get off my obsession, and we need to get back to this. Moving on.
We've set the stage, and now it's time to delve deeper into Moonlight Mystique. Spoilers ahead as we start with a drama deep dive.
Let's jump into Drama Deep Dive, where we navigate and analyze the key scenes, character arcs, plot twists, and emotional gravity that pull us deeper into the stories we love.
The more I watch these, I haven't, like I said previously, have not watched a lot, but I'm just quickly and very starkly being constantly reminded that I am not emotionally built for Xianxia's. They're too much for my fragile little emotions. And the very clear fact that I'm a dramatic crybaby.
Oh, very much so. I know you cried multiple times. I think you've definitely cried in every single one of them that I've had you watch, for sure.
Yeah.
Hands down. I don't think you can get out of a Xianxia without crying.
No.
The only time I get out of a Xianxia without crying is because I hate that I'm not that emotionally attached to characters, but I'm really not. I have teared up before. I think I'm not sure if I cried or teared up, in Till the End of the Moon, but I know I teared up in Fangs of Fortune, for sure. And in Moonlight Mystique.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't think I did in Moonlight Mystique, to be honest with you. I was upset with the deaths, for sure, but I definitely did not cry.
It should have me bawling at my work desk on several occasions.
And sometimes in the bathroom.
Not for this one. That was Fangs of
Not
Fortune.
for this drama. You're right, that was Fangs of Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Not for Moonlight Mystique. That's fair. I think while Moonlight Mystique was really good at introducing characters and then dramatically ripping them away, I think the difference between that one and what made you cry for Fangs of Fortune is that Fangs of Fortune, you really got attached to a character before they did anything to them. You had to you full on bonded with these characters, versus in this series, yes, you bonded, but there was it was over a span of if you're lucky, 10 episodes, maybe less before something happened. So I think there was
My
less.
precious Muju, they didn't have to do him like that.
They didn't! The man survived because of Hen Yu, which doesn't make sense logically, but it's fantasy. We're
It
going to leave it
doesn't.
alone. We're
I
going to leave it alone because it's
chose to ignore
fantasy.
that.
I'm choosing to ignore that. But this man survived all of that only to die again. Or actually die. Like, what in the world was that? He didn't deserve that. The Fox clan didn't deserve that.
They did not.
They were too precious for that.
I straight up texted Nixie while watching the show about like an episode or two before it happened, but I'm like,
was it this one? Jingshan.
I was like, if he dies, I'm quitting this drama. And like, I think it was like I said that the episode before. And like the next episode he dies. And she was like, well, you've got to finish it. Like you don't have the option to quit. And I'm like, but what if I do?
What did I say exactly though? Because like what I said exactly was, I feel like, more hilarious than what you just explained.
You talked about like if it makes you feel better, he turns into a rock that is given to the love of his life. And I'm like, no, Nixie, that makes it worse. Emotionally for me, that makes it so much worse.
Look, I thought it was actually precious. I mean, yeah, it was sad, but it was also precious.
That girl at that point had 2 death mementos of lovers. Muju,
he wasn't a lover.
He
tried
was
to
in
be.
love with her.
He was in love with her, that's for sure. She just wasn't mutually loving back, per se.
I can't. I've said this once, I'll say it a million times. I'm not emotionally built for these. I'm a dramatic crybaby. I cry too much. I emotionally invest in characters way too much. It actually ruins my day. Often. Nixie, continue.
I don't know what to tell you, my dude. Honestly, I'm trying to find our text messages.
You don't have to go that far back.
I found it. If Xianxia dies, I'm quitting this drama is exactly what you said. And I said,
that's what I said.
And I responded, oh, buddy, I don't know what to tell you, but you're not allowed to quit the drama regardless. And you said, no, please lie straight to face. Because you didn't put my face. You misspelled it. And said,
I was emotionally unregulated.
Okay, if you're emotionally unregulated, this is how your sentence was. It's no, please lie straight to face and tell he's going to be okay right now, please. And I said, okay, he's gonna be okay with the quotation marks. And you said, that's not what I asked for. And I replied, I'm mad with power. I've got to stop being so evil, but I can't. It's too funny. You said, Nixie, please. And I said, heavy sigh. And this is why I like to be a know-it-all.
She just enjoys my pain. It's fine. I'm fine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He plays my best friend. Really, really likes to make me upset.
What makes me upset?
I said, help me, please. My best friend loves to make me upset.
You're fine. You're fine. Do you actually like? Do you want to stop? You want to stop?
You call me on at least 2 notable occasions from Xianxia specifically, crying so hard I throw up. Okay?
That's not my fault that you got emotionally attached to the characters. Okay?
You know my history. You know what I'm like. You know how I be.
I do know how you be. But you gotta pull it together and watch these Xianxias. They're really good. They've got good meaning behind them. They're beautifully created. They're amazing. We're majorly off topic. We need to get back on topic. Moving on, though, about the actual story itself. I think the plot to this is pretty unique to a certain degree. I mean, I think some of it's a little cliche, but at the same time, that's just kind of a given, especially under just genres in general, like just in general for genres, like not just Xianxias, but general genres tend to follow a kind of theme. And like, I thought one of the funniest things you pointed out, I think in one of your notes, was, oh, another magical rock.
There were so many magical rocks in this series. It was insane. Like,
first, it was the rock that entered her body, and then it was, in order to save her, it'd take another rock.
Another rock.
And then
Xianxia turned into a rock.
And then
just so many rocks. In my notes specifically, I have in all caps, the little rock. Everything in this drama comes down to little rocks. All caps, multiple explanation points. It's and like, where did I lie? The answer's nowhere.
Hey, someone out there loves the fact that it's based off of little bitty rocks, okay? They can do a lot of things. I think world building wise, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time that I've seen a series where gods don't exist, but they did exist kind of situation. And that's fascinating on its own because like you go into like this setting idea that to a certain degree it's kind of one world where everything's on the same plane. It's just different locations. They actually didn't they call it Eastern Continent? Like it was
Mhm.
literally supposed to be based off like the Eastern Continent essentially, and it was kind of interesting. But there's like essentially it's like the same plane, different domains, like between human immortals and not immortals. Yeah, no, Eternals, demons, and humans, which is interesting because one of the things I found kind of fascinating was that I'm curious to know where Eternals originate from because if you go back to the story 60,000 years ago, it's kind of brought up that the only races that existed was the Eternals, not Eternals, sorry, the
The
deities,
divine,
divine, I think it was the moon divine, whatever one,
the lunar.
lunar, yeah, the loon deities kind of situation, loon deities, the void, and the demons,
It
and
was
they
the
kind of
hidden
almost
race.
the hidden race. Oh, I thought it was where am I getting void from? Oh, I'm getting void from the starry love. My bad. The hidden race, the loon deities, and demons, which also kind of got established. Correct me if I'm wrong, but almost like they're on three different planes,
Mhm.
like different worlds on their own, which is very interesting concept. Now that I'm speaking it out, and I think that's what really helps about doing this podcast for us and us talking out, it actually makes sense now that I think about it, because both the lunar deities and the hidden race were destroyed in the 600 years ago with clash between the two,
Mhm.
the other two, between Moli and Xingyu when they clashed. It kind of now makes sense now that I think about it. At first, I was like, this isn't making sense, but now it does now that I'm expressing it because I guess that destroyed their realms as well. And it kind of would explain why Demon Realm exists as a base. But my next follow up question, if that's the case, then where did humans sprout from? Because in that 600 years ago, humans didn't seem to exist at that time. It's kind of fascinating actually, because it's almost like the demons were the humans of the 6,000 years ago, just with more strength than humans have.
Yeah. Wow,
But
yeah.
now that the tides have shifted, they've become the hidden realm. The Eternals become the lunar deities, and the humans
Yeah.
become the demons' original placings, except for a lot weaker than demons, which is a very fascinating parallel. Now that I'm mentioning out loud, to have
Yeah.
brought upon the two different worlds. You didn't think about
Interesting.
that, did you? I didn't either. But as I was
I
saying,
didn't.
that's something I do love about stories is finding like these little parallel things that have been played out and
Mhm.
talking things out loud tend to like help me point out more things, some things I didn't realize, like just then that alone was very fascinating to like really think about. So you have that kind of aspect. So again though, where did the humans come from? Where did Eternals come from? And like how did they start
Eternals.
playing into the
Yeah.
storyline? And where they come from? But honestly, I don't really need to know that. That was just more of a curiosity kind of situation. But even so, world building wise, that's still very an interesting play on things.
Yeah.
Having destroyed these very strong aspects. Though I know I'm bringing up so much, but another food for thought that you like to always say, is now that we're in this new world, back in the old world, the 6,000 years ago one, an even higher seemed to be existing being was heaven, which is a very interesting concept in this kind of setting, that apparently heaven is all controlling. Like, think about it. It was even able to control the bow, that any point that she fell in love with
Yeah.
anyone, it would end them because she couldn't have these emotions. And she was like, if you're all knowing, I'm all knowing, completely brings her man back to life, resets the whole thing, makes her hate him, whatever kind of situation. My curious question is, why did heaven go through this whole thing if it's all knowing? It's like, why are we going through this whole trouble 6,000 years into current time for all of this to span out, for Bai Shao to be reborn as the deity again, for the lunar, like the bow and everything. Also, to have made her sister the fucking
Yeah.
bow? That
I'm like
was mind-boggling.
you have the whole thing of, like yeah, like, to be able to, like, save the world as you know it, your sister has to die.
The interesting thing though about that though is before that scene actually happened, I don't know where it clicked, but there was a something clicked eventually as I was watching it, and the further we got into the scene of her dying, I was like, "What do you want to bet she's the bow?" Like my brain was something in my
Yeah.
brain was like, "What do you want to bet she's gonna be the bow?" I was like, if she ends up being the bow, we're done. We're done. Like I can't believe you did that. That is. I won't lie. As much as I think that's wild, that's actually pretty creative.
Yeah.
I really wonder, and I think heaven established this in the end,
Human embodiment.
embodiments of heaven. I I
Wild.
I can't remember exactly because guys, when we make these, we do tend to binge the series and stuff like that, and then it takes a little bit for us to sometimes do the audio, or do our recording. So it's been maybe a week or so since I've seen the last episode. And if I remember correctly, they kind of said that the whole reason why Bai Xiao went through the whole situation with her sister, having grown attached to her sister, going through the hardships of her sister, and her sister ending up being a beau, was in the sense of doing the kind of the opposite of what happened initially. And that was initially she wasn't allowed to have emotions or attachments. But this time they were like, we were in the wrong. You now need those attachments
You need to
for
feel
this to
every
work.
emotion.
And so, because like they were like, we couldn't tell you who you were, and we couldn't tell you who your sister were, and we couldn't tell you who we were until you experienced every hardship that you needed to experience among like being human, among understanding demons and eternals before we go and outright you go through this whole situation before we like show our face. We show you who we are. And we tell you, and you go, your sister is revealed as about like everything, all this whole thing. That's wild.
Yeah, it was a time indeed.
Oh yes, but I love that. Ironically, I love that about the series is because it's kind of a very unique. It's amazing how complex a lot of these Xianxias or wuxia, anything under this fantasy genres, can get very creative and very
Mhm.
complex. When done correctly, not that there might not be plot holes, but they're not as noticeable plot holes. Like I said, the world building ones kind of got pointed out because the more we talked about it, the more we really looked into it. But if had I not looked into it and talked about it, I never would have noticed them. Never would have thought of them.
And, like, that part really doesn't have an impact on the story as a whole. That's just a little extra thing.
That's a little extra thing I kind of started thinking too deeply about. Another thing I do want to say is I love aspect wise that's one of the things that I found fascinating about the establishment is in most Shenchias, not always, but in most Shenchias, when you have the demons versus immortals kind of situation, it's typically demons are like ruthless, which is kind of what happened here. Ruthless, dark colors kind of aspect, which they still had in this series. But the difference was in most internal ones, usually they're bright colored, they're living lavishly, but they're living like
Mhm.
supposedly like in this like really light kind of aspect while the other one's a dark concept. In this one, semi the same, but not quite. The difference was they weren't living lavishly, they were living, I almost wanted to say dirt poor, like they were living like
That's what I was
straight.
almost saying.
I was like, is that rude for me to say? They were living like in a house with holes in the roof because they refused to fix it. They were like, no, we got to earn our money even though we can snap our fingers and fix it. I was like, that's kind of hilarious. I actually love that about that because that was a different twist on the immortal
Mhm.
aspect, on like the viewpoint of like these good beings. Instead of living very well off, they were living kind of in a more like, I would almost like a human presence, but not quite. Actually, they lived more like wild plant animal slash situation, honestly, if I'm going to be honest, which made sense for them.
Even though they were largely unhelpful the entire series.
Oh, they weren't helpful at
They didn't
all
they
during this
didn't do
series,
hardly anything.
which I think again added a very interesting piece to the series that's very different from other ones is because yes, I think the most traditional aspect, which still kind of happened, which is where it's like the roles get reversed, where the demons end up being more favored versus the immortals in most chanchas. This one kind of happened that way, but it was more in the sense of not that they were evil, but more so they were useless. Like they were
Yeah.
too detached, as lovely Bai Lu, who played Bai Xiao, said one of my favorite lines is that I don't know if I can repeat the exact translation exactly, but it was essentially that I didn't know anything about the immortals and demons, but I've come to learn that demons are ruthless and immortals are demons are ruthless and internals are detached, and humans are the weakest, or something like that. The weakest, so no one can get anything done but me. Like, it's kind of like, if it's kind of like the sense of, it's the sense like no one can do what you need done if you don't do it yourself. And she's kind of like, I can't trust anyone because no one can help me but me, because no one else, everyone else is like so somewhere else. And those are some of my favorite lines she's ever delivered, because it was such a heartbreaking realization for her to have
Yeah.
hit, to have her to go and be like, I so badly wanted to become this being, these that could help people, only to come to understand the better grasp on the actual reality of what she wanted to be and the other side as well, and have this, and just hit a low point. It wasn't even her lowest point, but it was one of a very low point for her at that time, having just lost her dad and everything. And so that was one of my favorite lines. And so that's why I love that that was one of the aspects played into it, was that they didn't just not make the internals, what do you want to say? Instead of doing the opposite like they do in most of them, where it's like it's more gray than you think it is, it was
Mhm.
more like they just weren't useful.
Yeah.
Like they didn't really play a part in it. So like that was kind of a cool twist, I think was very unique too about it. Having explored a drama deep dive, let's shine a light on character constellations where new stars await.
By mapping out character constellations, we chart out the growth of our favorite characters, exploring how they shine brighter over time, evolve, and form unique constellations with the characters around them. There are so many characters in this drama.
And at the same time, so many cool connections as well.
From like past to present to like kind of like alternate realities through like the mind things to like learn the story of like stories of the past.
I think they were really good at making every character have a purpose. And that's one of my favorite things,
hmm
is having characters have purposes, because I feel like they leave a hole if they don't have one. And that was
Yeah.
all the way, I mean, yes, supporting characters, like I mean like background characters don't necessarily need them, but it's the ones that when you start bringing ones forward, it's kind of important for them to have a pretty decent role into the story, especially if they
Yeah.
start playing too much into the story to begin with. They kind of need something. Like, for example, having Muju come in, and his actual entrance was fighting off Rong Xian, who wasn't actually there. It was a leftover of his resentment. And then later being pulled into the resentment with our main characters, as well as another character, which kind of does also, he also gets brought back up a little bit. His play was
Yeah.
more so a part of being the disciple kind of situation with some of the Eternals. Him and the other character had a little
Him and the
feisty
grape.
attitude. Yeah, the grape.
The
That's what
grape.
how we're going to refer to him as. And they kind of, their role wasn't significant, but even they had a decent role, because they were the role that allowed, when they went to go one on one, not one on one, when they started to face Bai Xiao, when she no longer had Fen Yu at the time, because he was
hmm
deathbed at that point in her thoughts. Went one on one, they were the ones that kind of intervened for a minute here and was like trying to calm them down. And so they kind of, even though their role wasn't huge, still played a pretty significant part. But back
Yes.
to Baiju, to have thrown him into the mix, it was good that eventually turned around. He played also a largely significant role in the story later on, and every character eventually did that. Um, I will say there's a lot of relationships we can bring up in terms of
Oh,
characters
absolutely.
and parallels. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I can bring up so many things about parallels in the series that I was obsessed with. Like, let's do the most
the
basic parallels right now.
the sibling parallels.
The sibling
Is
parallels
that where
is
you're going?
insane,
Because that's
and
where
I'm
my mind went.
obsessed with it.
Oh,
No, absolutely. My brain immediately went to the siblings pairing. And theirs was truly fascinating to see, because up until the end, cuz technically they both lose their siblings, but I
yeah.
think my favorite parallel was that in Fenyu versus and Qinyi, which they were twins, versus Bai Xiao and Fu Ling, because one of the coolest ones between their reflection, their parallels, is seeing the difference between the siblings of one of them remembering their sibling versus the other
Mhm.
one having no idea about their sibling. And that's a
Yeah.
cool parallel because one, their temperament was very different. So honestly, had Fu Ling remembered her sister, I don't think it would have played out the same way as Qin Yi, because Qin Yi had resentment towards Fan Yu that he developed on his own, which was kind of sad because he deep down really loved his brother, but he
Yes.
ended up getting it because he was like, I never understood why his life became the way it was, all because he tried to help his brother in by like taking his purple eyes, and then the chief,
Mhm.
who knew he wasn't the correct twin, ended up sacrificing him
Sacrificing.
in the
Yeah.
end. So he kind of ended up resenting him, even though deep down, which was a very fascinating aspect for his character, was that even though deep down when he returned after the Tiger clan was destroyed, returned back to the Baizi clan, only to realize it was destroyed, they were all dead, but to kind of be relieved that the only mound or that wasn't there was Fan Yu's mound, like as in meaning he was possibly still alive. And then the whole thing
And
happened, and
he sat and waited there just in case his brother came back to look for him. And the Rock clan finding the remnants of the Baiju clan, which situations happen, leading
mhm.
Chinya to the state he is found in throughout the beginning of the series in present day, where he doesn't have use of his legs. He's in this really cool wheelchair, design wise.
But I think that's a very cool parallel right there.
Mm-hmm.
Having him develop a resentment out of love turned to hate towards his brother, knowing who his brother was, because I
Yeah.
think another thing that added to his hate wasn't just like his sacrificing situation, it was having learned who Fan Yu was and who he was becoming, not thinking and not realizing that he had tried to become this demon lord specifically to get revenge back on the Tiger Clan, having not known the Tiger Clan was wiped out, I think, at the time just yet, to get revenge, having not known that, thinking he just did all of this to just build himself up,
Yeah.
was where he developed his hate, versus the parallel with Fu Ling and Bai Shi, where Fu Ling just completely had her mind completely wiped. She was purely trained to be a soldier. She was like, I'm on survival mode at this point, and I don't care who intervenes at that point, to the point that she was so much having forgotten her memories, had killed her own dad,
Yes.
which devastating when she realized what she had done
Yes.
afterwards. But she had killed her own dad essentially, and she had kept by her sister from intervening in his death up until after he was already gone. And it was interesting too because she did cry, she did tear up for a second there, and she felt something, but it was because she had no memory of it. She couldn't like fathom what that was. And
Yes.
so her hate versus Chinyi's hate was different, because her hate was purely built on the emotions that was broke by her master of the Cold Palace, because she had no memories, versus Chinyi was focused on his past memories. And so the relationship between the siblings was a interesting parallel to see,
Yes.
and how they interacted with each other, because it was drastically different but similar at the same time.
I knew immediately the second that Chinyi dies, I'm like, Fuling's dead.
Mhm.
If Fu, because like at that point it was like hinting that Fuling was Bai Xiao's sister, Bai Shi. And like if Fuling is Bai Xiao's sister, she's also dead because they're not going to allow one long lost sibling to live and the other to die. So I was like, that's happening 100%, and I was correct.
But I will say, I do like how, while yes, they do kill both of the siblings off, and you kind of predict that.
It's in different
One,
ways and for different reasons.
exactly, that's what I was gonna say. It's where Chinny, yes, he leaves positively, AK, kind of, through his leftover residence, but it was very much still viewed in a negative aspect, because in Fan Yu's perspective, he still had done it in revenge, even though that
Yeah.
revenge shifted back to the clan, because he found out that the master was the one behind the whole thing.
I think I called him the Cold Springs Palace Master the entire time in my notes. I don't think I'll be able to help you.
But I was gonna say is, yeah, so his was kind of a negative death, while Baishi kind of got to reunite for a little bit, a
Right.
very small period of time with with Fu Ling. So she had a second to reunite, and so it was more of a positive outcome. But that was a beautiful parallel.
It was.
I don't know how strong of a parallel this one is, but it's still a parallel to really think about. And that's the two romance parallels between,
Mhm.
I was going to say between, I don't know if this is the same one you're thinking of though. Now, there's multiple ways I feel like this parallel can go because there's multiple relationships you can parallel these up to. But this one specifically is between Ling Long and Rongxian and the 600 years ago romance, 6,000 years ago romance between Xing Yu and Jing Quan. Why? Because both of them were from different, completely opposites kind of sets of worlds that did not want them together to a certain degree. One
Mhm.
was their own clans themselves did not want them together.
Yeah.
The other one was heaven did not want them together because of one of their presidents. Both end up negatively, but in a very drastically different way. So that's very fascinating on its own because you kind of get a view into the 6,000 years ago without ever going 6,000 years ago because you go
Mhm.
10,000 years ago to the love between the Fox clan and one of the internal sects. And
Kunlun.
yeah, that one. And how they fell in love with each other and their clans didn't want them together and how their manipulation went down for that one.
That was hard to watch.
Oh, that one was pure evil. What they did.
The realization for Muju to like must have like gone through realizing that like his entire life he was told the Fox clan's interpretation of what went down, holding this so much resentment toward
Towards his
Rongshan,
dad.
towards his father.
Who did not know it was his father.
At the time, no. And like like seeing how he was manipulated into going to the Fox clan to extinguish them for the sole purpose of like making him return and be blindly faithful to the Kunlun sect. Like that was hard. That was rough, my friends.
He not only went and I'm talking about Rongshan. He
Mm.
not only went and unconsciously destroyed the Fox clan to regain conscious through the blood of his lover, which wild concept, but still gained his consciousness through that. Turned around in pure anger and went back onto his own sect and
Yeah.
completely destroyed it to the point that they struggled to get back together, but to also cover the fact that he had done it to keep the sect going. Because if they had let out that one their own highest regarded member of the sect clan besides the elders had done what he had done to his own sect, they would have been done for in terms of ever getting
Oh yeah.
anyone else to join them. And two, that's a humiliation for them. So to
100%.
turn around and not only be like, we had him go after the Fox clan, but we never mentioned to anyone. We only say that the Fox attacked us first before we attacked them, which never happened.
Absolutely not.
That is wild.
Also, slightly circling back to like the blood of his lover is what woke him up. That is a wild take on the a true love's kiss will wake someone up.
It's China. What do you expect? Honestly,
Learning
they
to
come up with the
expect the
wildest
wild.
ones. Oh, yes. You're going to expect something. Always expect the unexpected with Chinese dramas, for sure. And I love that about them.
So like on the slight topic of like romance
Mhm.
as like a connection between characters, I personally adore the way Bai Xiao and Fan Yu's relationship, both
Yes.
romantic and just in general, progresses. Because like we talked about this before, the how it was multiple mutual manipulation to mutual affection, but like the way it is crafted is so smart because like as specifically as Bai Xiao like learns more about like the world she's been enamored with and like growing into the person who she is desiring to become and like learning more about Fan Yu in general like serves as such a beautiful like just personal growth but like mirroring that to the growth of their romantic relationship together is so good. It's so smart and it serves as a beautiful narrative.
I love the fact that they were one of the most least problematic
They were
romance
so
couples
healthy.
I've
Oh my gosh.
yes. You don't see that often, especially in
No.
Xianxia. You don't see that often at all. Usually
They
misunderstandings
talk to
happen
each other?
all the time. Yes.
There wasn't a silly, stupid breakup over miscommunication? Beautiful. Unheard of. It's great.
I mean, there were times where, like, Fan Yu would get, like, upset and mad at something, and he would kinda ball up and, like, soul up, but, Baisha was like, "If you don't tell me, I'm not gonna know what you're mad about," and, like, she would find out what it was, and then she'd kinda,
And it
like
was typically about, like, something that she was doing that was a detriment to herself, because she has no regard for her personal safety or well-being.
I agree, it was very beautifully crafted. You don't see that often.
As someone who, like, thrives on, character growth and, like, emotionally attaches themselves to more so the characters rather than the narrative, I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun for me. Did it
See?
emotionally break me? Yes. Am I fully recovered emotionally? No. Will it ever be? No. Like,
You'll
will
be
I continue to put
fine.
myself through this torture for Nixie's entertainment? Unfortunately, yeah. With that being said, we've journeyed through a drama deep dive and character constellations, but now let's explore the world beyond the stars for one last perspective.
Step into the worlds of Beyond the Stars, where we journey into creative set designs, stunning costumes, and world building magic that transport us to places beyond imagination and bring the world to life.
The styling in the show is so good.
It's beautifully crafted, and I think that's down from the costume straight to set designs.
Oh,
And
yes.
one of my biggest obsessions, and this isn't just this series, but it's usually with just Shanshas in general, is how well the locations and the
Mhm.
outfits, like together, honestly, complement the characters and both usually what their character is going through and where they're at. For
Yes.
example, not in terms of character growth and arcs, but in terms of location, I genuinely am obsessed with how each clan or each location, if it wasn't human, if it was human, it was very like natural setting, kind of
Mhm.
neutral. But if for each demon or if it was eternal ones, usually we didn't see a lot of them though. It was usually the same
Yep.
area. But for the demons specifically, I guess I would have to just point them out. Every location was different. And
Yes.
if you saw a scene from that said location, you would know what arc and what clan it came from because of
Yes.
how crafted each one was. Like, for example, I will argue that there are some similarities, but not
Yes.
drastically the same, between Cold Spring Palace and Bright Moon Palace. They had some similarities because they both were heavy in purples. But the fascinating aspect of it was that Cold Moon Palace was it was like this bright. It was a type of purple that was almost. It was actually like evil looking. Like it was also based more in stone aspects,
Yes.
while Bright Moon Palace was more focused on like this something about it was very lighthearted in the purple and like
Mhm.
the whatever material in terms of like the buildings were made out of was a lot more. I don't know if the words the word isn't softer, but it was something about it displayed almost like this more
It
eloquent
was a cooler
style to it.
purple. Like a cooler purple.
Yes, it was cooler, but it was very fashioned to fit almost this more elegant kind of
Mhm.
style, which very fit the Moon Palace. And then if you go into the Outcast, was it Outcast? No, it was the Outlanders.
Outlanders.
The Outlanders had this very stone, rugged. It wasn't the same as the Stone Clan, but it was also very dark. This one was interesting because it
Mhm.
also had purples, but it was very heavy, like a muddy, like muddy purples,
Yes.
muddy reds, muddy greens. Like you had like multiple colors. It was almost like if you cut like a not a limestone, but those type of gemstones where you cut them and have like the ligaments, like the different type of
Yeah. Sedimentary rocks.
sanitary there. Thank you. Sanitary rocks. And you could see the different lines and the different markings that kind of gave it this almost stone appeal. It very well fit that Outlander vibe because it was like it was almost deserted kind of rock style.
Yes.
It was very fitting for them. And then going to like the rock clan itself, they did in fact live amongst actual rocks. Their
Yeah,
style
of
was like
course.
almost like oldish kind of like wooden thing. That was or the Fox clan. They lived in
The
caves.
Fox
They
Clan.
when they
Oh
went
my
outside,
gosh.
it was very grassy, very pretty,
Mhm.
grown very nicely. I loved that their rooms weren't rooms, they were caverns. They were like wide
Yeah.
open caverns. And I'm like, how do you get any peace from this? But okay. It was so
There would be so many echoes. Never a moment's peace.
never. but I love when that happens. And then their clothing, on the other hand, was very
Mhm.
to wherever they came from. It tend to
Yes.
very fit the style, the theme of whatever clan, but not just that. Back to what I mentioned, something about how I love how outfits sometimes tend to like tell you where a character's at in their growth.
Yes.
Biggest examples is always the protagonist. Whoever the story is based around is the biggest example to see this type of look. If you've ever watched a Xianxia, or no, honestly, yeah, just a Xianxia. If you ever watched a Xianxia and you watch these dramas and you watch the protagonist, female, male, doesn't matter. I've seen it in a male perspective. I don't think it happens as badly as it does in this one with the male protagonist with Fan Yu. But if you want a male protagonist for anyone who's seen Till the End of the Moon, it's heavily there with Tin Tai Jian. He heavily goes to this aspect I'm fixing to talk about with Bai Lu's character, Bai Xiao. Because Bai Xiao has this very strong, where she starts in like this very, believe it or not, she starts in clothing that's very arrogant because her clothes
Mhm.
are very styled as the General Mansion's clothing. Like, it's not
Yes.
styled so much that she's like, her personality's arrogant, but it is styled in almost like she's ignorant, but
Mhm.
lives a very lavish life, right?
Yes.
And so after that happens, you get her mourning clothes, which makes sense because, she's mourning her death. But then she turns around, and after her mourning clothes, she ends up in the clothing because she ends up at Bright Moon Palace, which aren't elaborate yet. If you paid attention, they're very dull. They're not, if I remember
Mhm.
correctly, they're not very, very extravagant. How am I trying to say this? They're not very detailed. Like, it's still very much Bright Moon Palace, but the moment after she comes back from I don't, what was the next arc? Was it the Outlanders? I didn't think it was it? Maybe it was the Outlanders because yes, it was, because when she comes back from the Outlanders, I don't remember deeply what her outfit looked like during the Outlander one arc, but I don't think we had hit her major. I think she was still relatively her old clothing. Like, she was still
Yeah.
fluctuating back and forth between this beginning part of Bright Moon Palace clothing and her first initial clothing that she had. And I think it was some sort of mix between the two. But you notice it was so fascinating to see when you can tell when she takes on the role of being standing beside Fan Yu and trying to take his problems in after the Outlander and after he had like I think no, there's a scene I'm trying to think of where she ends up putting on like these clothing from the Bright Moon Palace, and her from her hair to her outfit was very elaborate. And I know it happened around the Outlander mark. I think it was. I could have sworn she was still trying to solve something for him, but I can't remember what it was. His 7-star
Yeah, 7 burning stars.
7 burning stars.
Seal.
That's what it was. That's what I'm trying to remember. I was thinking it was his memories, but it was his seal or whatever it was that he was losing. That's what it was. You could tell she took on his problems and trying to figure this out. It was kind of like the turn of their love as well, because it's like she took on almost, not quite, but took on the role as already as the kind of like the mistress, like his lover. Like, she had already almost like dressed into like that role because of how elaborate her outfit had come. Her confidence now has shifted so much, especially being next to Fenyu and like where they're at in the storyline. And like, it grows more and more as the outfits change over time and we go up. And like, you might think I'm crazy for picking up on that, but like, it really happened. Like, if you really pay attention to the costume designs, they really do shift so creatively with the arc of the characters.
I truly think like the design behind like every element, especially it's heavily prevalent in Shanjia's, as I'm coming to know, that like the details that most people will overlook tell a stronger story than the narrative alone.
Yes.
Like the added elements of the sets, the costume design, like add so much nuance to the characters, the narrative as a whole, that is honestly beautiful.
It's one of my favorite aspects of Shanna shows. Is that's why I love and Cyrus has seen me do this multiple times. It's why every time, not every time, but most times I watch a new Shansha, I will blow their phone up with photos of the costumes from the series specifically because I'm obsessed with them, with the details.
You can't see me, but I'm nodding.
But yeah, no, I'm obsessed when it comes to like Xianxia's and their set designs and even their makeups.
Fu Ling's makeup this entire series was so good.
The
Oh my
flowers
goodness.
that would go up
I
her
was
face
obsessed
or
with it.
the
It's so good. Fu Ling is also a good example. It's not as intricate because she's not a main focus as much as Baishao, but she's also a really good example of how clothing reflects her role and position in like her personal art.
dare I say she went from being armored to disarmored.
Yes.
As we gather to leave the stars behind, let's gather the stardust of our experience and share our final reflections on Moonlight Mystique. Honestly, again, I feel like we always talk way too much about the other sections that we kind of have already stated everything we needed to say by the time we get to the actual summary part. But I feel like it's also still needed because there's still so much to wrap up for it.
I will say, I can't believe we forgot this.
What did we forget?
The Mu arc. The arc where Fanyu loses his memories. We didn't mention it at all.
Oh my god. You know
And that
what?
was
I know
ah.
this belonged in the the deep dive section, but that's okay. That's okay. This is our wrap up. We can say some things we forgot. So we forgot the Moo arc, which is the arc where he lost his memory. That was
And
so
Baisha was like, I
precious.
can use this. I'm your lover.
I think one of my favorite moments is when she kind of did that, but I think she got played more than he did.
Oh
Because, like,
yeah.
he played her not knowing he was playing her because he had no memory.
Absolutely. I believe you 100%. Like, where are you going? We're lovers. There's a bed right here.
She's
And she's
like,
like,
yeah, no, you would
please
kill me if
don't.
you had your memory. So,
Um,
no.
this is gonna lead to you murdering me.
And I think it's hilarious because this man got a kiss out of her before Fan Yu got a kiss out of her. And that
And
was
he was
hilarious.
so mad about it.
He was jealous. He kept thinking them as two different people. And she's like, you were the same person. You just didn't have the memories. You were you with before you became the demon lords. Like you were still yourself, just a little bit different. And that, oh my god, I was so obsessed with that. He was so cute when he was Moo, and then it was hilarious that when he gets his memory back after the whole kiss scene and everything, and he's like, I can't believe you don't understand why I'm mad at you.
And like even like before like he like regains his memory back, he goes to both of like his guardians and being like he didn't actually it wasn't Tenhyo because Tenhyo would I'm so glad he didn't go to her because she would lay into him. but
hmm
but our rock boy was just like, yeah, I don't know what she's doing. Y'all are becoming close, but like lovers, no. And he's just like, interesting. I'm gonna continue playing this because I kind of like it.
I do think he ended up confessing that he found out they weren't lovers, but I think he was like, I'm okay with that. And
Yeah.
I do find one of the most precious scenes was when they were sending up the lanterns, right? They were sending the lanterns up, and he was like, I know you want him back, but until you get him back, is I want to say my final goodbyes kind of thing. Cause like he knew, and then
Yes.
that's when he like gave her the kiss because he was like,
It's
because
so
he's like, I know
cute.
I love you. And I don't know how if he loved you, but I'm gonna tell you I loved you before he comes back.
It's so good.
I love that it was interesting to me that the romance happened very early on in the series. And at
Yeah.
first, usually when a romance happens early on, I'm like, oh goodness, what's gonna happen later?
Yeah.
But I love
Like
actually that
they
it
were
did happen early because it kind of built that bond that they needed for
mhm.
later on going through the series.
And like they were
And it
so
was
solid
interesting.
the entire time.
Yes, and it was interesting that it was done this way too.
Mhm.
Like this is how we kind of got brought on, and after the move stage, and after he kissed her when he was back as Fan Yu, it was kind of like, what are we? What are we now?
Like this is kind of like taking like a slight turn. But like any form that like Fanyu has, whether it be Mu when he loses his memories, or even Jingan as the demon god. I don't remember the
He
different in.
was a god. He was a god, but he was like the overall one for the demons.
I don't remember the because like
I
Fanyu
don't
is
remember
the
his
demon
title.
lord. Like, that the title is the word I was looking for. But even like when Jin comes back, because Fanyu is kind of dead, kind of not, kind of dead. But like he comes back and like can only see Baishao as Xingyu,
Mm-hmm.
and like him like still having like that, but realizing that like Xingyu is not Baishao, and Baishao
Mm.
only loves Fanyu.
Menu.
She's not going to love him as Jingyan. So he fully leaves. Like he gives up his being on in the realm, like being alive to give her back Fan Yu. I'm like that. Oh, every version of this man is perfect, coming from a sapphic individual. Ooh,
No,
every
I
version of this man is
agree.
perfect.
But I do find it so funny though, going back to Jingyan and when he came back in Fenyu's body, and I thought what I thought you were gonna mention wasn't the fact that he was perfect in every single version of himself, which he was. I agree. Because like he was ready to
His whole
sacrifice
thing of
himself.
like, there's no point of me existing in this world without Xingyu, so I'm going to
Hmm.
give you back Fanyu. I'm gonna give you back your Fanyu.
But no, I thought it was funny that that's what you mentioned, what I was thinking of, and I agree with what you said. But what I thought you were going to mention, based on how you were like, no matter if it was Mu, or if it was Fan Yu, or if it was Jingyun, I thought, minus the Fan Yu part, I thought you were going to mention that as Fan Yu, it didn't matter if he was Mu or if it was Jingyun, the man was always going to be mad about it. With the interactions with him, because one of my favorite funny scenes when even though it was really sad but really precious that Jin gave up his life after 600 years of trying to find her, gave up his life because he realized there was no point at that time anymore. Was I love that he was talking to Fen Yu, like the spirit, like
Oh,
personality of him
yes.
to himself,
Oh,
and he's I can tell you don't like me either.
and he's like, no, you're trying to get my girl to fall in love with you. Like, no, I don't like
That's
you.
what I thought you were gonna bring up, because I love how this man Jin was like, yeah, I can tell you have some animosity with me, and that I can feel deep down because it's your body, because you're still here, that you don't like me either. Just like you didn't like Moo, and I thought that was so
Oh,
funny.
it's so good. But like while
It
he
was
like
protective
was
of
he
his girl.
was yes. Oh my goodness. But like not in a red flag kind of way. Like
Mm-mm,
you can be
mm-mm.
possessive and it be presented in a really negative light. That's not what we're talking about here. This man was great because like he never truly like why like yes, he was like pouty towards Baishao every time it happened, but he never was angry at her. It always came back to him being angry at himself. Like it was so cute.
It's so funny. I loved him. He was so precious. But back to like,
As a now that we've got our little side rant that we should have had earlier out of the way, final thoughts. Come pulling it all together.
it was well written. I don't think Cyrus regrets letting me force them to watch it.
I can't say that I did regret it. I like deep down emotionally, am I still hurt? Yeah, but that happens all the time. But like this show, it genuinely is like a beautifully told story. Like it's so good. We didn't like mention it very much, but like the little bits of humor that are like dropped into the show is like just elevates like the growth and like the emotional impact of this show. Cause like if it's all bummer all the time, it's not a good time. But
Mm-mm.
if you can make me cry and laugh, I'm not gonna be mad at it at the end of the day.
I think overall we had a lot of what we had to say about the series, especially deep diving into a lot of things that happened. But I think
But
I'm
still
really
not
thankful.
touching on half of the things that happened.
No, there's still so much more
So
that we did
much.
not get
But we've been here
get to
for
hit.
so long.
And it's like we kind of need to chill out.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if y'all need to know that, but it's
But it is.
2:30 in the morning.
I think it's just well crafted. It was well
It
written
was.
for what they created. I don't know how it compares to the novel that it was based on. Don't know how different or how similar it is. I've never read the novel, I've only seen the series. But I will say I don't regret watching it, not one bit. It was
Absolutely not.
stunning. I love how it was done. Both also the casting was very well put together. I think they chose very wisely for a lot of their
Mhm.
choices for that, as both casting as well as in the designs that played out for it. Cuz like fantasy's got to be one of the most equally fun but difficult things to put together.
Yeah. It's super hard to, like, nail down, but, like, once you nail it down, it's so rewarding.
And because you're pulling from so many things, pulling
Mhm.
both from the novel it was based on, but also different aspects of, I would assume, mythology, Chinese mythology in this case, literature. You're pulling from the arts that they have, as well as different minds, creative minds on this project to create these worlds in which these characters and the characters themselves live in. And so all the way down to like the OST. My favorite OST is the opening for the series because it was so powerful.
Absolutely.
So overall, it was very beautiful series. If you
Very good
haven't
show.
watched it and you made it this far with all these spoilers, I for starters, I don't know why you're watching or sorry, I don't know why you're listening to an episode that deep dives and gives a lot of spoilers to a series you haven't watched. But if you haven't watched it and you listen to this, please go watch it. It is so worth the 40 episodes and the 30 hours that you to go through to finish it. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stars Align Dramas and Dreams podcast, where we meet amongst the stars that illuminate the love stories that light up our universe and connect us all.
If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share your stardust and thoughts with us. We'd love to hear your comments, favorite moments, or suggestions for what we should explore next.
You can connect with us in the comments or through our socials, as well as our email that are linked in the description. Let's keep the conversation going under the stars.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep listening, and remember, love always shines brightest in the cosmos.
Bye.